without, yeah, it's happened before. All right, as I said, I'm Michael Windsor, the co-founder of a project called Alpha-Omega, and I think my next slide is relevant. And so we created this project in 2022 with the goal of addressing, that whole open source security supply chain risk problem that people are waking up to. And we've been working at this now for a few years. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we've funded a lot of really interesting work. In particular, we've funded work here in Python, and gave a talk last year. This is an update. This is a follow-on. There's more, and interesting things come out of it. Our goal is not to simply just fund all the work and pay for the work, right? There's just an almost unbounded amount of work to be done. Our goal is to cause change to happen, to catalyze improvements in how every organization working open source, whether it is a single person maintainer working alone on nights and weekends, or a large organization, or something in between, that they are able to and do prioritize security work. Since 2021, we've raised around $23 million from our very generous sponsors. It's really been their commitment to this and their understanding that this is a huge problem. It's not going to go away quietly, and it's going to take real time and energy. And I think it's really valuable to talk about how we do things. So when we started out, the Alpha-Omega name, Alpha actually stood for, theoretically, the 100 most important, most critical open source projects. What we learned very quickly is, first of all, there's a lot more than 100 that are most critical. Secondly, you can't get 3 people to agree on one of them. And then everyone's definition is whatever they're using plus something like that. And that is actually, although jokingly whatever they're using is most important to them, it turns out that everyone's graph is deep and rich and messy, and there are really great sort of problems therein. And so Alpha came to mean points of leverage, where we could do something where by having one person or one project or helping one little thing over a hump could cause durable change and create real value and learnings over time. The scale part is because even if we literally talked to everybody who we knew on those 100 most critical projects or whatever, there's hundreds of thousands of other projects. And they're not going to fix themselves, and we need to look for ways that can address that at scale, possibly by throwing money and compute at the problem in a relatively efficient way, but it's a hard problem. We've learned a lot. So when we fund things, our funding goes into 4 categories. And speaking of leverage, staffing, where we actually make it someone's job to do security. And these are actually the most expensive things because those pesky people want money and lives and mortgages. And here in the United States, basic quality of life and insurance. So that's a thing. The other thing we do are package repositories. Again, they are the app stores of software development, right? There's no greater force in the universe than an engineer on a deadline at a bank trying to get some tab A into slot B. They Google the question, Stack Overflow points them to npm install foo or pip install foo, right? And on the same Stack Overflow article, the top ranked comment is, don't do this, it's insecure, your universe will end, right? They're doing it, it's a done deal. We do a lot of audits. Audits are a great way to start on any particular security engagement. You learn a lot. Everybody learns about the culture of the organization, why they need work, what needs to be done, what changes to happen. And then because none of us know what the hell we're doing, and I mean none of us, this is a very new space. It's like Y2K for those of us old enough to remember that, without the same clarity of problem, solution, or date. So let's talk about things that actually got into practice, because I told you the abstract. Well, coincidentally, last year we gave this talk. It was just Seth and me, and Mike was sort of languishing in the audience. We'd call him to answer questions he didn't have any preparation for, the poor guy. And we talked about the work we'd done and various things. And a gentleman, raise your hand please, Jarek, right here, as I am prone to do, continuing the tradition, right? Do you have some slides ready, Jarek? Could you come up and do So Jarek came up to us afterwards and says, this was a great presentation. I really love what you're talking about. Can you do a keynote at the Airflow developer conference later this year? And we looked at our calendars and go, like that. But more importantly, I'm like, I don't want to do it just to repeat the talk. I want to talk about something that we can do together. And so Alpha-Omega actually funded a project working with the Airflow community, and Jarek was very much a pivotal point leading that way, to improve security in the Airflow project as a whole. And the backstory here gets back to that scale problem. when we started some of the scale things, we had done automated scans and automated vulnerability detection and automated fixes on literally the top, I think, 3,000 packages transitively closure in PyPI. And came back with a bunch of work and a bunch of fixes, a bunch of patches, a lot of unhappy humans. And at the end of it, and we did that across a bunch of other ecosystems, it sort of felt like we set out to fix the Pacific garbage patch, and we'd paid somebody to do it, and they went out there, and they came back with a rowboat full of plastic, or maybe a barge full of plastic. We don't know proportionally relative to the garbage patch how much of a difference it made, and nothing they did could make anybody's lives better. There was nobody who could say, great, they did that, I won't worry about that, I'll worry about this. And so with Airflow, we decided to think of it as more, rather than trying to pick up the entire Pacific garbage patch, we said, let's clean a beach. Let's go to a community that has a beach, that knows about the bounds of the beach, and let's not make it perfect, but let's make it better. And let's get it to the point where once a beach becomes clean enough that people enjoy it, they're far more likely to either take care of it or be willing to pay for taking care of it, or some combination of the above. And so we did that with Airflow, and it was amazing. And the work continues to go on. The Airflow community has essentially prioritized security work. They looked at all 719 dependencies, and they looked at them not to do an audit on each one of them, but to see how does this project represent what is its security posture? How healthy is it? How much of a risk is it to us? And this is the important lesson. Most of us sit here working on our project. We've got fixes to do and features to add and so forth, right? And we're looking at our code, and we treat all of our dependencies as if they came down from the sky on the back of a unicorn. Rainbows everywhere, it's awesome, right? But that is not the case, right? You have not just achieved free beer by getting somebody else's code, you have free puppies, and they're somewhat inclined to destroy the carpet, pee things, fight with each other, and make a mess of things. Here's another way of looking at it, right? When I was writing code, which is a long time ago, right, we had a stack that looked like a very thick operating system layer, very thin SDK layer, and then mountains of proprietary code. And we wrote tests for that code because that's where all the change came from. Now, we have a thin operating system, right? Distroless containers, things like that. We have a mountain of open source code, and then a thin composition layer where you're pulling all these packages together to make something that does something really cool, right? Where's all the change coming from? Well, you can live in a world where you never update your dependencies. We know how that ends, right? Or if you're living anywhere close to head with your dependencies, there's a lot of change coming through there. How many of you have written tests to validate your contract with your dependencies? That's my point. So you're sitting here, you have all this spend in terms of your time and energy, whether it's money or time, on your own code, and you're sitting on top of a rickety platform that is well-intentioned and awesome, but is not getting the attention it cares. And what happened in Airflow is they started paying attention to upstream. And there was a project that was deemed, we don't need to take this dependency, they got rid of it. And there was another project where they're like, there's a problem here, we need to help them. And so from this came this framework. And you all live in this space whether you want to or not. You look at your dependencies and you're either doing one of these things. And if you're currently doing nothing, you're doing the worst version of fork. Because you now have a downstream, unmaintained, semi-hard fork of something that's not getting patched. Right? So these are your choices. Which one are you doing? And if you're not intentional about it, well, then it's happening to you. So it's not just all your code, it's all your problem. So everything starts with an audit. Look at your own code, look at your dependencies, know what dependencies you have, be intentional about them, and then have a relationship with them. This is a key point. In your project, is there somebody whose job it is to be the person who worries about security? Not does all the work, but is worrying about it. Because if they don't, it's nobody. And as we'll talk about in a second, right, just by making that be somebody, it doesn't mean they do all the work, but they create a prioritization. They create leadership. They create momentum. They create change in your project. So I'm going to be handing off to Seth and Mike in a second, but if you want to learn more about Alpha-Omega, this is the QR code. By the way, we'll also have a QR code at the end. Please remind us for the whole deck so you can get the slides and enjoy them later on. But that last point about leadership is why we are so happy with what we've been doing in the Python ecosystem. One of the first things we did was, this is actually one of the first projects we funded, was to create a security engineer in residence role in the Python Software Foundation, an organization that had the human capacity to have another human and had the organizational ecosystem impact to make differences. And we couldn't be happier with all the work that happened last year. And now, Seth, over to you. Talk about what happened this year. I will be interrupting Seth routinely during the conversation.
Right. This is next, I'm assuming. Okay. Hey, everybody. Ooh, is it on? Should be on.
It's on.
Hello? Okay. You were just so much louder, Michael.
I am.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Seth, security developer in residence at the Python Software Foundation. And I mostly focus on the work that's outside of PyPI. So I'm focusing on things like the CPython runtime, pip, and then like the thousands of other Python packages that are happening. So like Michael said, with the multiplying effect, one of my favorite things to do is to do something really hard that's security related for like CPython, for example, and then figuring out what were the hard parts, what would be relevant for other people, and then writing about that, either as a guide, or can we create a standard about this? Can I go to a security working group and then create a standard or a guide with them? And that's been extremely like rewarding. And even just yesterday, Erlang, they announced that they became a CVE numbering authority using a guide that I authored last year. So it basically means that we have all of this new security value. People are able to do all of this work without even talking to me, because they didn't even mention that they were using the guide until the announcement, so I had no idea. And there's just tons of different organizations like Linux and curl that are also doing the exact same thing. And so I try to focus my time a lot on standards, at least having one or two of these happening at a time. So these all happened in the past year since the last PyCon. The most important one that I am really proud of is the software bill of materials for Python packages. Last year, I got to come up here and say, we did SBOMs for CPython, and it was a lot of work, and it was really great. And so we took all the things that we learned there, and we said, okay, how can we apply that to all of Python packages? And then I'm also really active on the Python security response team. So that's the people that if you email security@python.org with a vulnerability in Python or pip, then we respond. A lot of the work that I did here, besides just the usual like triaging and making sure that things actually land, I'm looking for ways that we can bring in core developers more safely. The previous process was very ad hoc, so like adopting GitHub security advisories to be able to bring in core developers when they're needed to work on fixes, as opposed to the old process, which is mostly just like, how do we get someone on Discord to talk about this? And then automating a lot of the CVE vulnerability record data, all of that stuff, because it's just a ton of work to have to do manually. Eventually, we want to be able to have like volunteers be able to take care of this. So being able to automate that is really great, and then I'll be able to share those automations in the future. So I included this slide because I think it signals like a new novel threat to the Python ecosystem. So Ultralytics was a threat that came in by targeting GitHub Actions. There's some other talks. I think William Woodruff might be doing a talk about Zizmore, or a lightning talk. He's definitely talking about attestations. But this is something that we're seeing more often, where users are targeting these novel threats, such as GitHub Actions. But then what we try to do is we try to learn about them and see what things we can improve on the PyPI side, or improve on the GitHub Action side, or on the packaging tooling side, to make it so that it's either harder or impossible for these types of attacks to succeed. And so like by me being full-time staffing, it means if there's like a fire, like XCUtils from last year, for example, I'm able to kind of like drop my work and then pick up this extremely novel and new thing that's affecting the Python ecosystem very acutely, and then do a full fix and postmortem on all of the things that need to happen afterwards. And so, for example, for this specific one, PyPI ended up implementing a fix that would warn users if there were tokens that were still around, even after they had been using trusted publishing for some time. Because before there was no warning for that, and so now we at least give you like a nudge where it's like, hey, you haven't used your authentication tokens in a while. Maybe you want to expire those. Because at the time, that is one of the ways that they were able to intrude into this package. And so this is the SBOM one. I have an entire talk about this on Sunday. So if you want like the nitty-gritty details about that, it's all about phantom dependencies and how they acutely affect the Python packaging ecosystem due to both the archive formats, but also like all the different communities that we serve. So like the scientific computing community, artificial intelligence, all of that.
I hear that AI is a thing now.
AI is a thing now.
Yeah.
Yes. Speaking, there's a little AI slide.
Not even before.
But yeah, so please come to this talk if you're interested in this. But the big thing to know here is that like this is basically building on what we learned from CPython, where it's like, okay, SBOMs, they're not this magical bullet. They're basically just a format for being able to talk about software without it being ecosystem specific. It's ecosystem agnostic. You can talk about C code, you can talk about Python code, you can talk about JavaScript, and Python handles all of these things and needs to be able to talk about them. So that's why Software Bill of Materials was super important for the Python ecosystem. And it's also important for a lot of the upcoming security policies, things that are happening, like the EU Cyber Resilience Act. So you'll be needing these. And then, so SigStore, this is like adoption of new technologies. So I wasn't involved at all in the adoption of SigStore by CPython, but I was involved in everything that came after that. So this was basically we had a situation where we were seeing our PGP signatures were still being used everywhere to verify everything, but we really wanted to migrate away from them. And in the past, there had been like a lot of pushback from distros where we don't want to move away from because things are working, so it has this like Gordian knot situation, right? We want verifiers to be verifying the things that we're putting out, but they're not willing to change to the new ones that are better, that we're going to be relying on from now, and they're like automatable. And so I had to end up like bridging through these two communities, verifiers on Linux distros and like Docker and PyEnv, and the release managers. So the last release manager to use PGP will be Thomas. And for Python 3.14, which is in beta right now, there are no PGP signatures. It's all SigStore, which is very exciting. Yeah, so we're getting rid of that. And there was a whole bunch of like downstream work that this catalyzed. Like there was some maintainers on the Debian side that ended up like trying to bring in cosign. There was a whole bunch of problems that got talked about because we announced the fact that we were deprecating it. So people went to the SigStore Slack and talking, Linux distro people went to the SigStore Slack and we're talking about problems with cosign and offline verification and how is this a drop-in replacement for PGP. So it ended up being like a really positive thing. And then long term, the reason why we really like SigStore is because in the long term we'll be able to switch to workload identity instead of human identity. So in that way it'll make it so that release manager identity isn't a part of the signature. It'll be like GitHub Actions built this from this commit and all of that. So it's build provenance as opposed to Thomas signed this or Hugo signed this. So. Okay, so this one is kind of a personal win. Basically, over the course of 4 different PyCons, starting with a lightning talk. That's a lightning talk where I was sandwiched between the two, my first PyCon, sandwiched between the 2 release managers, Lukasz and I believe it was Pablo. And I was like, oh boy, what am I getting myself into? But it ended up catalyzing, like I met with a pip maintainer that year, and then the next year I met with Giannis and I met with a few other folks, and we ended up getting it implemented in Conda, and then we get it implemented in pip, and then through all of this data that we were able to collect on actual users are using this and are not seeing problems, we were able to way more confidently say, okay, let's move forward with this in pip. And so just this past year, we were able to say, okay, let's use system trust stores by default. And so if you've ever used Python or pip within like a corporate proxy, can I get like a show of hands for how many people have done that? And how many of you have had to disable certificate verification in the past? Anyone? Okay, yep, definitely some people. It's fine. You don't have to anymore because it'll just work. And that is a really, really big thing. So like if you go on Stack Overflow and look for the solution to this problem, it just tells you to turn off certificate verification. And it's understandable why that's the case because you have to deal with so much organizational stuff to be able to do it the right way with Python. But no longer in the newest version of pip, it just works. And this is my mandatory AI slide. Yeah, there's tons of great things happening with LLMs and AI and code and all of that. That's great. Unfortunately, I end up having to deal with a lot of the downsides of it. So things like hallucinated security reports are a thing that I've kind of started the conversation along with Daniel Stenberg about getting these in your security reporting emails and how much that drags down maintainer time and enthusiasm for security. And so I do talk a lot about this whenever it kind of comes up. Thankfully, Python doesn't get a ton of this, but I do hear about it from like other maintainers of Python packages quite a lot. People will tag me in, and which I'm very thankful that people trust me enough to do that. But to ask about this and like what people are seeing, and this kind of speaks to like the social side of security, where everyone really wants to do the right thing, and so they're unsure about saying like, oh, this security report that looks very legitimate is nothing, and I'm gonna just ignore it. Like, people don't want to say that because they don't want it to be wrong, and then it ends up being a firestorm, all of that. And then also, unfortunately, I coined slop squatting. Sorry about that.
That's the kind of leadership that we had in mind, right?
Which had a Wikipedia page way too fast, and so it just kind of blew up. And then in general, I think that you had a slide earlier that was all about like experimental, what's coming next. And so these are things like, hey, we know that there is going to be more LLM generated code in the future. What do we do about that? Things like static analysis tools, capability analysis, just in general quality tools, because we want the code that comes out of LLMs to be secure, even if it's, regardless of where it's coming from, code that's from an LLM or from a human. And then this is like my favorite part of this job, is I get to talk to people about security, talk to all these different people about their projects and the problems that they're having. I've found that being in this position at the PSF and being kind of like highlighted as this person is working full time on open source security has basically meant that like my email, and I get tagged on GitHub, and people will just bring me into conversations that they're having, and it's just like amazing, because it just means that all of this security work that's happening in other places is just getting catalyzed because I'm able to quickly answer questions, or if someone like needs help with something or an opinion, I'm able to just really quickly get back to them. There's no cycle time because I'm able to work full time on this. And so giving these talks like this, talks like the one I have later, it just heightens community awareness of security and who's working on it. And so this is my what's next slide. The big one is the Cyber Resilience Act. So it's a thing. It has already happened and finalized, but there's a lot of things from an open source steward perspective, so like the Python Software Foundation, but then also manufacturers. And I need to think about both. So what will software manufacturers need to be able to comply? What will open source stewards need to comply, whether they're as well resourced as the PSF is right now, or if they just have volunteers that are trying their best to comply with things. So I need to care about both of them. And then the security response team, I would like to formalize it a lot more. Right now it is very loose. It's basically just a mailing list of people that have access to security reports. I want to formalize it so that people feel like they're more able to join and contribute, and also just invest some more in GitHub security advisories. And then continue doing like the most impactful thing, I think, for this role, which is security in a box, where you do something and then you write about it and you make it easy for everyone else, and then you let them go off and remix it for their project and their community, and it just ends up making this huge network effect of security. And that's all I have.
I want to just double down on, like, when we talked about leadership, right? Seth is just scratching the surface of the things that have happened because he has been in this role and been working across the community. And what's been, I think, amazing to talk about from a Python perspective, but then when we look outside of the Python ecosystem, in part because Python was one of the first people to start doing this, but also because just the great people working on it, the leadership there, whether it is trusted publishing or how to become a CVE numbering authority and all those things, it's outstanding, right? And Python has been leading the way on a prioritization of security work and how to do it. And we couldn't be happier. It's really awesome. So thank you. Oh, Mike, we're out of time. Sorry.
Oh, well, there are the highlights. You can catch the deck later. That's fine. That was great. Cool. Thanks for teeing all that up so I don't have to repeat any of what they just said. Hi, I'm Mike Fiedler. I am the PyPI Safety and Security Engineer at the Python Software Foundation. That is a mouthful. and it's a lot of fun. But I've been doing this now for coming up on 2 years, and it's been a journey. There's been a whole lot going on, and as Seth mentioned, he's part of the Python security response team, the PSRT. That is not the PyPI security response. We are security at pypi.org. So depending on what security issue you're trying to navigate, email one of us, but not both. So some highlights from the past year that I want to share. So 2FA is now on for everybody. It took a monumental effort, and a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing today, I didn't even start, right? Like, I have to give a whole lot of homage to the folks, one who's in the room, who preceded me on PyPI. PyPI is this amazing service that's been around for 20 years before 2FA was even a thing we were worried about. And it's evolved a bunch over that time. There have been a bunch of different contributors, but now it's in my bucket to kind of worry about. So I'm going to talk about things. I didn't do them all, but I brought them here today for you. And when Michael talks about security roles as leadership roles, sometimes I'm just making sure the ball gets over the line and like we get there ultimately. I might not do it myself, but a lot of this I did myself. So this kind of chart is showing emails to maintainers. Once we had flipped on the requirement for 2FA, we said, okay, now 2FA is required, but we're giving this kind of window to folks who are already publishing and they're already established. We don't want to break their workflows on day one, on January 1st, 2024. But we do want to kind of give them a heads up of this is coming. So we set up every time they published and they didn't have 2FA, they would get an email. And if you are one of those publishers, you might have gotten that email. I'm not sorry. And if you got it 2 weeks later again, I'm still not sorry, because ultimately it worked. And right around here, it started, this is the enforcement date, January 1st, 2024. We saw this massive downturn. And then around here in July, I'm like, okay, we've sent 475 in a week. We're bringing the hammer, right? And then at that point forward, it is 100% of all uploads to PyPI are 2FA enabled. Again, this was not a trivial amount of work, but it is a critical amount of work. With this, we've had the added burden of extra support for account recoveries, people making mistakes, and we've successfully onboarded a full-time PyPI support specialist to help handle those. Her name is Maria. She's here. Say hello. Say thank you. Go to her talk. She'll be talking about it.
Absolutely.
Look it up online on the site when it is. I don't remember offhand. But it was just such an important moment to say, we're doing this, because even GitHub, it's optional. It's still optional in 2025. It's not optional at PyPI. It's optional in other registries, but not here. So we're trying to lead the charge on certain things. Somebody has to break the mold of what the status quo is, and if it is us, then so be it. We'll learn. We might hurt a little bit, but we're trying to minimize that pain from going out to anyone else. But at least we'll be kind of pushing all of us forward.
You're normalizing it.
Normalizing it. There we go.
That's really what's happening, and it is working.
Yep. A huge part of my job is malware response. PyPI is a free resource. You can register. You can upload for free. It costs you nothing. So people do, to the order of almost 1 million users, some 600,000+ projects on PyPI. We get about 10,000 users register per month, which is a ridiculous amount of people to be coming onto our platform. But sometimes we get some really interesting malwares, very much like Seth talked about Ultralytics. This was an AIO CPA. This is that blockchain technology. People love going after blockchain wallets because they can exfil them if that's on your machine. This one in particular was an interesting, weird behavior because it followed a pattern of a project that looked fine until it wasn't. The maintainer had this up and running for, I believe, 3 months, 2 to 3 months, and then suddenly there's malware. So they kind of created a useful tool, generated some utility of it, and then pulled the rug out from under you and said, we're also taking your money, right? And then they opened up an account recovery request, which I'm like, the gall. Okay, right? They didn't get it. But
it costs nothing.
it cost nothing, but they tried, right? So this is up there on the PyPI blog. You can read all the details there. But one of the pieces that helped us get into these deeper analyses, again, if all we have is our volunteer PyPI admins, nobody has time to do this unless they are curious and it's part of their job or their weekend. But as a full-time engineer, security person, I've got time to do this. This is the important part of the job of like, how do these non-trivial cases manifest? And in order to kind of start adding the ability to annotate different projects with this metadata, I added a model called an observation, so that way we can kind of dynamically add stuff to different database objects so we can review them. And aside from these massive campaigns, we do get, we're closing on about 200 events per month that are coming in from either security research partners who have, this is their bread and butter, this is their job, or folks who just go to the web page and say, report this project as malware. It's a form, you gotta be logged in, but you can tell us and that'll come to me or E or one of our other PyPI admins. But that's mostly what I handle. While Seth was speaking, I got one and dealt with it. Took one off.
Nice.
Yeah. As another piece, as an intermediary, before this idea of quarantine existed, the only activity that an admin had at their disposal is basically trash the project, which is a destructive operation, not a great outcome if they make a mistake, so everybody would take a moment, double check, make sure that we're not deleting the wrong thing. With quarantine, it's just put you in timeout. I can reverse that very easily. Right? So it's this intermediate step that allows the project to exist. It disallows a maintainer to continue to publish more versions of it, but it puts the whole thing in timeout. Mirrors will stop copying it, and it basically kind of just stops advertising. It's still available on the web. You can browse it and look at it, and it'll show up of this project has been quarantined and link you to the FAQ as to what does that mean. But this notion, oh, there's the logo. We also added the ability to notify our admin Slack, so that way we can get some stats of like, this has been quarantined. And then the little Slack notification here is automated quarantine. So when we have these external research partners we've worked with for a while and established kind of a degree of trust, we give them an extra flag on their account that says, you are now kind of one of our trusted observers, that when you report stuff to it, that has a little more weight to it. It won't immediately delete anything, but it provides a little bit more confidence that they think something's fishy. If 2 of them report something, it'll automatically go into quarantine. So they work around the globe, and they exist on different time zones. I work US East normal hours, right? If somebody is uploading or attacking a popular project like Ultralytics in the middle of the night, I'd much rather the whole project go into auto quarantine state and nobody can download it again until we review it and generate that noise, as opposed to allowing the attack to persist and infect everybody. So we develop these abilities in order to react better.
Mike, I didn't get my super quarantine bit flag turned on for me. Was that?
That's intentional. Okay. Yeah. No auto quarantine for you. Right? We don't trust your observations.
Exactly. I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just checking.
Yeah. And to date, I believe 2 auto quarantines, since it exists, have been false positives. And we're talking thousands that are true positives. So it's kind of working. So I'm happy about that. And the quarantine heads into a Slack queue and go through and review them the next morning and probably trash most of them. But some of them lead to other investigations of interesting attack patterns of this user tried these other names, this package depends on these 3 other packages, and those are part of kind of a second stage distribution attack. So it's helpful to be able to put a project in timeout to minimize the external impact on users who might want to look at it while we're investigating it.
It also provides another benefit, which is there's a pretty common pattern of people uploading good, 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 bad, good, 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 good. And so in a lot of cases, when we're like trying to like unwind things and go delete releases, if we all call it like Friday at 6, and they start their campaign at Friday at 9, auto quarantine might shut them down Friday at 10, and then the whole thing's frozen, so we can actually see the state without having to like peel all the onions back, which is nice.
Absolutely. It's been a kind of a safety blanket, if you will, that like I don't have to worry about PyPI on the weekends unless I want to, right? But I don't have to. Another kind of attack mitigation thing that I introduced this year is called Typo Sniper. There's this paper written called Typo Guard about a decade ago, and it's a fun paper because the code that the author uses is written in Python to analyze NPM dependencies for attack patterns. And then it was picked up by our friends over at the Rust Foundation for Crates, and they wrote their version called Typomania. And then last year's Reinforce in Philadelphia, I met with them, and they were telling me about it. And I was like, so now I'm getting insight from a Rust project to rewrite it in Python. So it's yet a good thing that all of the package registries kind of talk to each other, because we have a lot of the same problems. And they all acknowledge that Python has the worst volume of problems. They're all the same, but we just have more. The code is there. Again, it sends a Slack notification. There's about 4 or 5 different algorithmic checks that are not heavyweight that look for common typo scenarios. This does produce a whole lot of false positives because the names people choose are often the initials for some acronym of a project, and it's like, yeah, somebody else had one that was 1 letter off, and that in of itself is not a problem, but it is a signal for investigation. So these are a little more frequent and mostly false positive. As we go through kind of learning more about its characteristics, we may kind of tweak those parameters or look at its evaluation window and kind of decide how do we minimize some of the noise in order to then annotate with observations against those projects that are exhibiting this behavior. So that way, if we do apply a heuristic-based quarantining, we could use that as another data point in that heuristic. Beyond security and safety, we all have to work on this code base. It's the warehouse. It's about 180,000 lines of Python, a lot of JavaScript, HTML. And writing and running tests is important because if you don't test your software, how do you know it even works? The Trail of Bits folks produced a blog. They have worked on since March, roughly, when they started looking at PyPI CI speed, how long it takes for our GitHub Actions to fully run. E has worked on it a lot. I've worked on it a lot. We've done a ton of incremental bits. They coalesced a bunch that they did actively in order to kind of bring the test down. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I measured it on my laptop. The same code that we ran back in January took 70 seconds. Now it takes 27.5 seconds. So marked speed up here. So that way I'm not selectively only running some subset of tests on my laptop. I'm running the entire suite. We're running it for every PR. There are over 4,700 tests. A lot of them are using database artifacts. They're using HTML rendering, and we like that to go fast. So there's a bunch of different speed ups that you can read about in their blog. But you can also read about the warehouse code base. It's open source on GitHub. One other kind of non-CI speed up is something that we worked on. So this is a particular view of an XML RPC mirroring protocol endpoint. And we don't like it. We don't have a better one yet. We'll get rid of it when we have a better one. But we're not building a better one yet. But we will get rid of it. But this particular query was a stark reminder that the things you do should leverage the technologies that you have. The database that backs all of Warehouse is Postgres, and Postgres is freaking awesome. And it can do lots of really cool stuff. The XML RPC responses are JSON blobs. They're big JSON blobs. And for every single project name and the last time it was updated, its serial in a mirror protocol, that block is a big block. And that red code that's been removed, we're performing this query to the database with SQL Alchemy, fetching the records, and then marshaling a response into JSON. The previous query uses Python, so it fetches all of the records. It uses Python to kind of marshal all of that into the subset of data that we actually need to send along. Whereas I can ask Postgres, hey, why don't you just build me a JSON blob and then ship me that back over the wire, so you've done the hard work of marshaling everything together in the right structure. And that one dropped it. Like, it started out earlier in that day cycle at about 10 to 15 seconds, and we got it all the way down to sub 5 seconds, which is pretty sweet. It's still not as fast as I would like it to be, but it got materially faster and fast enough that we said, you know what, we're good enough here, right? We don't need to keep pushing the envelope because, again, it's still translating about 600,000 records in that JSON blob. So it's expected to not be the fastest thing in the world, and it's cached up by our caching layers, but it has less impact on our database server, on our application server's memory, because it doesn't have to pull everything into memory to then build that object. It can kind of focus on doing the thing that it's supposed to do and alleviate some pressure on our other resources, which we get donated, want to maximize our utility of. So that's very important to us to make sure that Warehouse is kind of operating as sustainably as it can in the constraints that we have. Because we basically built our own DDoS service, right? Like, we're asking the world to DDoS us. So.
No, we are not.
No.
Don't do that.
Yeah, use caching if you can, please.
XMRPC is not cached, by the way.
There's a cache on something there. There's a cache header. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. Anyway. So other work that has gone into applying the safety of the warehouse is we have almost 1 million users. There's a lot of user accounts that have email addresses. Email addresses have domains on them. Domain names have to persist forever, or people sign up and then forget about that domain, and then we get a domain resurrection attack, where if you bought MikeTheMan.com.
I really hate those.
Yeah, they're the worst. If you bought MikeTheMan.com, signed up for PyPI with it, and then let it lapse, then I can go buy MikeTheMan.com, set up a catch-all email address, go to PyPI, say reset that address, reset my password, get it mailed to me, and now I've got a password reset email. That sucks for you if you had any projects that you cared about under that account with a domain name.
And it really sucks for everybody who was using your stuff and are now no clue that suddenly the identity has moved around. So one of my longer term goals is to create a space where projects can, in fact, create a sort of an inheritance model. So as they sort of perhaps walk away from the project and no longer maintaining it, that a foundation that has a durability to it that individuals do not can maintain management of the keys to the kingdom. It's a big, hard problem.
So to that end, now we are validating email addresses coming in. So if you typoed something and it doesn't exist today, then you can't register for PyPI with that email address. But if you are using a service, a free email service, we disallow a lot of those disposable ones, where attackers will use those for 5 minutes, sign up for an account, upload a project, and walk away. So we try to disallow as many of those as reasonable. We also will added the ability to look at some of these services that leverage an MX domain as an as a way to obfuscate the actual service that is being used. So instead of me having to go to bobsemailsite.com and look at all the domains that they're just going to rotate through and buy and sell, I can just say anything hosted by Bob's MX record, don't allow that either. So that's a nice little utility. And now we're also detecting periodically whether that domain is expiring and invalidate its ability to be used. Because if you let that domain lapse, I don't want to let you use that for a password reset email. You shouldn't. It's expiring, or it's expired already, or someone's transferred it and now they own it. So I want to actively disallow that. It doesn't predicate you from the ability to go through an account recovery and prove that you are who you say you are through alternative means, but just an email address on a domain, not good enough. In early 2024, due to a domain resurrection attack, we, as PyPI admins, invalidated everybody who had a verified non-2FA email account. Because if you have not set up 2FA, if you have not verified, if you are, we don't know who you are anymore, right? You could be anyone. And everybody has kind of done their resets, their re-verifications as necessary, but there's still a lot of people out there who haven't. And that's okay, because if they come back, they can go through that process of re-verification. There's a lot of community engagement, entanglement. There we go.
Nice.
That I was done. That you had a lot more fun pictures. But I attended a bunch of fun conferences and talked a lot about Python, PyPI, volunteering, how all of this works. I've spoken to the Open Source Club in NYU. That was fun. A closed session for AWS community builders on software supply chain security. Just the ability to talk about what it is we do here and get that message out is so important. So I advise you to find some of these publications or talk to us if you want us on your podcast, because we'll talk to you. We like doing these things. What's next? So with PyPI accounts, I want to go through and take what I have learned over the past year of how users engage with the platform and build a smarter workflow. We have a bunch of different features that we've kind of adopted over time due to different individuals being the contributor or author at that moment, but there isn't kind of a comprehensive or cohesive vision for how user accounts are created, registered, verified. It kind of like, there's flags here, there's flags there. There's not a kind of, this is the flow. And I want to get us to a spot where that happens. Preventing completely domain resurrection attacks. Like, that's not a fun thing to do. I mentioned we get about 10,000 registrations per month. About half of them don't finish enrollment. So they're just these accounts that are living around for nothing. So I want to figure out a good way to prune those that isn't surprising. Maybe provide people notices of, hey, your account never finished. Do you want to finish it? Do you want to complete this registration? Or in 2 weeks it'll go away, or something along those lines. Adding more heuristics around the different signals, so that way we're not using kind of Boolean logic where we'll kind of accumulate scores internally through whichever method we have to say this is worth a human to review. Very few things should be completely automated without a human in the loop for security analysis perspective. But once we have a rock solid signal, that's when we want to start using those signals as activity things. I'll be handling lots of malware throughout. It flows in, it gets out, it happens. And a stretch idea is thinking about how we use our management API, which doesn't exist, but creating a management API that doesn't use our existing API tokens, because those have a different scope and different utility. They're called macaroons if you want to dig into what those are, but they're not the greatest and most useful for users to interact with a remote API like a JWT, which more folks are familiar with. You can find me at miketheman.dev. That's a link to all my others. You can find me in New York City. That's where I live. And that's it for me.
One more slide, I think. So this is Seth's handy page of everything you should really be going to learn more about from security here at this conference over the next few days. It covers everything you could care about. So if there's one QR code you scan, which of course is going to be totally secure, won't take you to anything suspicious at all. Yeah, exactly. Your phone is getting hot? Yeah. Working as intended. Excellent. This is good.
Yeah, straight to the wallet.
Yeah. Nice. And then one more slide. Yeah. This is a link to the deck where you can get all the QR codes, the links, and slides as well that you want.
So we have
We have some time for Q&A, yeah?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes for Q&A, so hands up if you have a
3?
question. Yep.
Would you be interested in like having like a secure template for packaging?
I have one, but it's a little bit out of date. It doesn't use like attestations, so maybe I should update it.
Can you repeat the question for the video?
Oh, sorry. Can you have a secure template for Python projects, Python packages? There are some templates already out there.
Did you speak there? I'll take this round. Next question.
There are already some out there, like secure Python templates. I have one. It's a little bit out of date, but go to packaging.python.org. A lot of the stuff there is like really up to date. It's community maintained, so use templates from there.
I just scanned this and it's telling me I need access to the slides.
That's my fault. I'll fix that. Yeah. Great. Now I know who you are. Any other questions over here? Did I see one? Oh, sorry. Okay. E?
Yeah.
What would you say the best part about working at the Python Software Foundation is?
Oh, it's a trick question. He's their boss. It's getting badly.
The best part about working at the PSF is being able, and this is also partially due to how Alpha-Omega has engaged with the PSF, is being able to work on the things that I think are the most important that I'm hearing from the community, and being able to self-direct when things change. So like when the XEUtils backdoor happened, I was able to drop the things that I was working on and completely focus on that for a few days and then get back to regular work. Whereas that's not typically a thing that you would do. You're working at a completely cross-project level. I mean, and also just the scale of everything. I don't know if you wanted to answer that too.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the best parts of working on this full time is that ability to go deep and not feel rushed that like I only have 20 minutes to work on this and I better maximize those to something I'm interested in. This is like, okay, I can really, spend the time that this thing needs.
And from my perspective, I don't work at the PSF, but having the PSF normalize security as a primary function of a steward of an entire ecosystem, the language runtime, the packaging system, and the community within that, it's a big deal. And ultimately, we want how these organizations live and fund and grow to just thinking, of course, you have security, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I actually just picked this.
Oh. Well, ask. You've got the mic now.
Okay.
Failed that question.
Is,
Right. Yeah.
Is it on?
It's having E as a manager. Might be.
If
Am
you're
I
holding the
getting
mic, you have to ask a question.
Hello? Okay. I'm going to just annoy Seth with this because I asked this last year. Should I be using Salsa attestation, PyPI attestation, or
PyPI.
GitHub attestation?
PyPI attestations.
And what about those other two?
Those are automatic, and they're also tagged onto the artifacts specifically on PyPI, so that if someone is using a package on PyPI, in the eventual days where people are like verifying all of this stuff end to end, you won't have to, oh, I'm using this project on PyPI, time to go look at GitHub for the GitHub attestations. So use trusted publishers and read the documentation on attestations to make sure that you're using the right version that's like further enough along to actually like automatically implement the feature. William Woodruff is giving a talk on this that is included on the previous QR code. Yeah, that one. So if you didn't get it and you care about attestations and end supply chain security, it's in that list too. William Woodruff is talking full talk about that.
And I'll add, watch this space. Salsa source provenance is coming out soon.
Yep.
There's already proof of concept where you could just add a couple of workflow things into your GitHub and then get source provenance that guarantees, that the source that the repo had the proper security settings on it and so forth. And hopefully that'll leak all the way up into trusted publishing over time. So
Will that be available on other providers? Is that in the roadmap
yeah,
as well?
yeah. We're going to start with a GitHub one, but then it's a container-based workflow. We can move to other things as well. Yep.
Just gotta tell me what links to implement on class.
Yep.
What links to implement?
Yeah, just tell me which
GitHub Actions.
GitHub action.
I'll just
Yeah.
I'll just open issues.
No, pull requests.
PR as well.
Yeah, but he wanted to annoy me. I have to do something.
Yeah, exactly. Any more questions? All right, well, I want to thank Seth and Mike and E for all their great work. It's been a tremendous partnership. Looking forward to the next year again. And you guys are amazing, so thank you.
Thank you.